What if your biggest competitive advantage wasn't technology? What if I told you that while everyone's obsessing over the latest AI tools and productivity hacks, there's a group of warriors from feudal Japan who figured out something way more powerful, something that no algorithm, no software, no machine can ever replicate? I'm talking about mental frameworks forged in real combat, where a single moment of mental weakness meant instant death. These weren't motivational speakers or self-help gurus. These were fighters who turned psychological preparation into a lethal science. And here's the kicker: what they discovered about the human mind is exactly what you need to thrive in today's chaotic, AI-driven world. Listen, know you're drowning in information. Between chat-gapped updates, market changes, and 73 Slack notifications screaming for attention, your brain is operating in survival mode 24/7. That's not high performance, that's barely functioning. Medieval Japanese swordsmen faced a similar problem, just way more intense. They lived in constant uncertainty, never knowing when death would come. So they developed something revolutionary, a mental operating system designed for clarity under extreme pressure. They called it Haijoshin, which translates to everyday mind or ordinary mind, but there's nothing ordinary about it. It's the ability to maintain absolute mental calm, whether you're sipping tea or facing a life or death situation. Think about how powerful that is in business. Your competitor freaks out when the market crashes. You stay calm and spot opportunities. Your colleague panics during a tough negotiation. You read the room and close the deal. That's not talent, that's trained mental resilience. And these ancient warriors spent their entire lives perfecting it. They understood something neuroscience is just now confirming. Your brain performs exponentially better when you remove the static of fear, doubt, and anxiety. Not by ignoring emotions, but by creating such a strong mental foundation that emotions become data points instead of control mechanisms. Here's what blows my mind. These fighters developed practices that modern psychology is only beginning to understand. They practiced something called zanshin, which means remaining mind or sustained alertness. After completing an action, whether it's striking with a sword or finishing a task, most people mentally check out. They're already thinking about the next thing. But zanshin taught them to maintain full awareness even after action completion, because that's often when you're most vulnerable. In modern terms, that's when you miss the follow-up email that costs you the deal, when you don't notice the client's subtle concern, when you overlook the small detail that becomes a massive problem later. The Japanese warriors weren't superhuman. They just had superior mental discipline, and that discipline came from deliberate training systems. They treated their mind like a weapon that needed daily sharpening. Most people today treat their mind like a garbage disposal, throwing in whatever content, news, or drama comes their way, and then wondering why they can't focus or perform. You want to be imbattable, unbeatable? Start where they started, with mental sovereignty. If this is resonating, drop a comment, sovereignty, and smash that like button if you're ready for this deeper level. How can 500-year-old mental tactics beat modern AI? Here's something nobody's talking about in the AI revolution. Artificial intelligence is exposing the massive gap between information and wisdom. AI can process data faster than any human ever could. It can find patterns, predict trends, optimize systems. But here's what it absolutely cannot do. It cannot adapt intuitively to novel situations. It cannot read energy in a room. It cannot make wise decisions that account for human complexity. And that's exactly what feudal Japanese warriors mastered. They became experts in what modern psychologists call situational intelligence, the ability to assess and adapt to changing circumstances in real time. These fighters developed their skills in an environment where there was zero room for error. One mistake meant death, not just for them, but potentially for their entire clan. So they created training methodologies that seem extreme by today's standards. They practiced in darkness to remove visual dependence. They trained in adverse weather to build mental adaptability. They studied the psychology of intimidation, deception, and mental warfare. Why? Because they understood that technical skill alone wasn't enough. Mental edge was everything. And that mental edge came from what they called kokoro, often translated as heart or spirit, but really, it means integrated awareness of mind, body, and intention. Let me break this down for you in practical terms. When you're in a high-stakes meeting and everyone's arguing different positions, most people get lost in the content of the arguments. Someone with kokoro awareness reads the underlying dynamics. Who's actually driving the decision? Where the unspoken concerns are? What's not being said? That's not magic, that's trained perception. The ancient warriors spent thousands of hours developing this kind of awareness because their survival depended on it. Your career success depends on it too. You just didn't know that's what you should be training. Now, here's where it gets really interesting. As AI takes over more cognitive tasks, the value of these human-only capabilities skyrockets. Companies don't need more people who can process information. They need people who can navigate complexity, lead through uncertainty, and make judgment calls that balance data with human factors. These are not AI skills. These are warrior skills. Skills that were perfected centuries ago by fighters who understood that the real battlefield was psychological. They practiced something called metsuk, the art of perception beyond sight. It's about seeing what's really happening, not just what appears to be happening. Think about your own life right now. How many times do you react to surface-level information without understanding the deeper dynamics? You see sales dropping and panic without understanding market cycles. You see a competitor's move and copy it without understanding their actual strategy. Medieval Japanese strategists would have called this seeing with blind eyes. They trained themselves to see patterns, read intentions, and anticipate changes before they became obvious. That's what made them nearly impossible to defeat. Comment below, perception. Share this with someone who needs to level up their mental game. Why the ancient discipline code is your unfair advantage today. Let's talk about something that makes most people uncomfortable. Discipline. Not the Instagram version where someone wakes up at a m and posts about it. Real discipline. The kind that transforms your entire existence. The kind that Japanese warriors built their entire system around. They had a framework that governed every aspect of their life, not because they were rigid, but because they understood something profound. Freedom comes from structure. When you have disciplined systems for your mind and body, you're free to perform at levels that seem impossible to others. These warriors followed codes that were brutal by modern standards. They practiced something called shugyo, which means austere training or spiritual discipline through physical hardship. They would train in freezing waterfalls, meditate for hours in uncomfortable positions, and push their bodies and minds to absolute limits. Before you think that's crazy, understand the psychology behind it. They were systematically expanding their tolerance for discomfort. Why does that matter? Because comfort is the enemy of growth. Every breakthrough in your life exists on the other side of discomfort. Most people run from discomfort. Warriors ran toward it deliberately. Here's a tactical application for you. Start doing the hard thing first. Every single day. That difficult conversation you're avoiding, handle it in the morning. That complex problem you keep postponing, attack it when your mental energy is highest. That skill you need to develop but feels overwhelming. Practice it daily before anything else. This is modern shugyo. You're training your nervous system to associate challenge with opportunity instead of threat. After 6 months of this practice, your baseline performance level will be higher than most people's peak performance. Not because you're more talented, but because you've trained yourself differently. The warriors also practiced what they called keiko, which means practice or training, but with a deeper meaning, to think about or consider the past. Every training session was a reflection on all previous sessions. They weren't just repeating movements mindlessly, they were constantly analyzing, adjusting, and refining. This is what's missing in most people's development: intentional iteration. You go to the gym, you attend the meeting, you do the work, but are you actually getting better or just staying busy? Real progress comes from deliberate practice plus systematic reflection. The ancient Japanese understood this at a fundamental level. There's another principle that's incredibly relevant today, rei, which is often translated as respect or etiquette, but it's actually about maintaining proper relationships and honoring agreements. In feudal Japan, your word was literally your life. Break it once, and you could lose everything. In today's world where everyone's ghosting commitments and breaking promises casually, imagine being the person who's known for absolute reliability. That alone makes you rare and valuable. Warriors built their reputation on integrity because they knew trust was the ultimate currency in any relationship, personal or professional. Let me give you one more tactical advantage from their playbook. AI, the concept of critical distance or optimal spacing. In combat, it's the distance where you're close enough to strike, but far enough to defend. In business and life, it's about strategic positioning. Are you too close to your problems to see them clearly? Are you too distant from opportunities to seize them? Most people never think about this. They're reactive, letting circumstances dictate their position. Warriors were proactive, always calibrating their position for maximum advantage. Drop a comment, discipline, and hit that like button if you're committed to this path. What happens when you finally master your internal battleground? Let me share something that changed everything for these ancient warriors. They realized that external victories were just reflections of internal mastery. You could have all the technical skills in the world, but if your mind was chaotic, you'd lose. They had a saying that roughly translates to, win first in your mind, then on the battlefield. This isn't philosophical fluff, this is strategic truth. Your internal state determines your external results, always. Think about it. How many times have you sabotaged your own success because of internal doubt, fear, or mental noise? That's exactly what they trained to eliminate. They practiced what's called mokuso, a pre-combat meditation where they'd visualize not just victory, but every possible outcome, including defeat and death. This wasn't pessimism, it was mental preparation. By accepting all possibilities internally, they removed the paralyzing fear of the unknown. When you're not afraid of failure, you become dangerous in the best way possible. You take calculated risks others won't. You speak up when others stay silent. You launch the business, make the pitch, have the conversation. Not because you're fearless, but because you've already processed and accepted potential failure. Here's something that'll blow your mind. These warriors trained something called Kyojitsu Tenkin Ho, the principle of interchanging truth and falsehood, or managing perception versus reality. In combat, they'd create false openings to bait attacks, then counter devastatingly. In modern business, that's strategic positioning, managing information asymmetry, and controlling narratives. While everyone else is being transparent about everything, high performers understand when to reveal and when to conceal, when to be visible and when to move in silence. This isn't manipulation, it's strategic intelligence. They also mastered sen no sen, which means attacking the attack itself or preemptive initiative. Most people are reactive. They wait for the market to move, then respond. They wait for competitors to act, then react. Warriors trained to see the intention before the action manifested and move first. In business terms, that's anticipating market shifts before they're obvious. That's seeing the opportunity before it becomes competitive. That's making the move while others are still analyzing. The time gap between seeing and acting is where average people get stuck. Warriors compress that gap to near zero through training. But here's the deepest lesson, the one that ties everything together. They practiced sui and ju, the principles of adaptability like water and flexibility like wood. Water adapts to any container, but never loses its essential nature. Wood bends in the storm but doesn't break. In the AI era where everything's changing constantly, being rigid is death. Being adaptable while maintaining your core values and principles, that's how you become timeless. Technology changes, markets shift, industries transform, but principles of mental mastery remain constant. The warriors understood something profound. Life is not about reaching some final destination where everything's perfect. It's about the continuous journey of refinement. They called this Musha Shugyo, the warrior's pilgrimage. It's the understanding that you're always in training, always evolving, always becoming. There's no finish line in high performance. There's only the next level. And that's not exhausting when you embrace it. It's liberating. Because it means you never have to be perfect today. You just have to be better than yesterday. Comment, unstoppable. Smash that like and subscribe button. Share this with your crew. This is just the beginning of our expedition.